Hey everyone, today we're digging into something that's absolutely vital for understanding the true health of a business: liquidity ratios. Now, I want you to think of these as a financial barometer, something that tells you if a storm might be coming way before it actually hits. So let's jump right in.
Here's what we've got on tap. We're going to start with a really surprising threat called overtrading. Then we'll see how liquidity ratios act as your early warning system. We'll break down three of the most important ratios, see how they actually get used out in the wild, and then talk about what to do to improve them. And we'll wrap up with how all of this helps you future-proof your business. Okay, first up, the danger of overtrading. This is one of those classic business pitfalls, and it proves a really surprising point. Just because a company is profitable, that doesn't always mean it's safe. So let me just ask you this straight up. Can a business that is making money, making a profit, actually go bankrupt? It sounds totally backward, doesn't it? But the answer, believe it or not, is a huge yes.
And this is where we meet this idea of overtrading. It's what happens when a business just grows too darn fast. It's taking on more and more orders, but it doesn't have the cash on hand to support that growth. And here's the key. This is not a profitability problem. The sales numbers look amazing. It's a cash flow problem. The company literally runs out of money to pay its bills, even while it seems to be booming. So how in the world do you protect yourself from a hidden killer like overtrading? Well, you need an early warning system. And that is exactly what liquidity ratios are for. I just love this analogy of a financial barometer because that's what these ratios do. They cut through all the noise and all the complexity, and they give you this one clear reading of a company's ability to handle the pressure that's coming its way. Okay, so the official definition is that liquidity ratios measure a company's power to pay off its short-term debts. We're talking about things like bills from suppliers, payroll, rent, stuff that's due within the next year. They tell you if you've got enough cash or things that can quickly become cash to cover your butt. In a nutshell, they measure your financial wiggle room. All right, time to open up the toolkit. Let's break down the three most common liquidity ratios that you are definitely going to see out there. So first up is the current ratio. This is kind of the big picture view. It takes all of your current assets, basically anything you own that you can turn into cash within a year, and it compares that to all your current liabilities, everything you owe in that same year. It gives you a really broad sense of where you stand, but keep in mind what's considered a good number can really change from one industry to another. Let's make this real for a second. Let's say a business has $500,000 in current assets and it owes $200,000 in current liabilities. The math is simple, right? You just divide the assets by the liabilities. So what do we get? 2.5. What this means is that for every single dollar this company owes in the short term, it has $2.50 in assets to cover it. Generally, anything over 1 is seen as a sign that you can cover your debts. So at 2.5, this company looks like it's in a pretty healthy spot. Okay, next up is the acid test ratio. You might also hear it called the quick ratio, and this one is a much tougher, stricter test. It gets its name because it's asking a really tough question. What if you couldn't sell any of your inventory? Like, what if it was all suddenly worthless? See, the huge difference here is that the acid test ratio yanks inventory right out of the equation. And that's so important because turning inventory into cash isn't always quick or easy. Imagine a fashion retailer with last season's clothes. So this gives you a more conservative, maybe more realistic view. And, if you want the absolute most hardcore stress test view, there's a third one called the cash ratio, which only looks at pure cash against your liabilities. It's the ultimate what-if scenario. So we've got these numbers, but who cares, right? How are they actually used? Let's get out of the textbook and into the real world to see why these numbers matter so much to people running a business. In the day-to-day, these ratios drive some huge decisions. If a company has great ratios, it might feel confident enough to go out and buy that expensive new piece of equipment. If the ratios are weak, you better believe they're going to put a pause on any big purchases. They're also key for building trust. A bank is going to look at these numbers very, very closely before they even think about giving you a loan. And maybe most importantly, if you see these ratios start to slide month after month, that's a massive red flag. It's your early warning that something deeper is wrong. And that leads us perfectly into our next section. What can you actually do if your financial barometer starts pointing towards a storm? So what happens if you run the numbers and they look weak? It's a scary thought for sure, but the good news is this isn't a death sentence. There are very clear, very actionable things you can do about it.
Here are 5 really solid strategies. First, get a handle on your inventory. Don't let your cash get tied up in stuff that's just sitting on a shelf. Second, get better at collecting money from your customers. Get those invoices paid faster. On the other side of that coin, you can try to negotiate with your own suppliers to pay them a little slower. And of course, the classics. Cut expenses that aren't essential, or maybe look into refinancing some of that short-term debt into a more manageable long-term loan.
Now, how urgently you need to do this really depends on the situation. If you're already struggling to make payroll or your ratios are way worse than your competitors, then yeah, this is a high priority, code red. If you're just getting your ducks in a row to apply for a loan, it's more of a medium priority, something you want to clean up to look as good as possible.
All right, let's bring this all home. In our last section, let's talk about the biggest takeaway here. How all of this helps you build a business that can last. I think this line from the source material just says it all. The real power here isn't just about understanding today, it's about what these numbers can tell you about tomorrow.
So here's the bottom line. These aren't just one-time calculations. They're not a static photo. By tracking them over time, you start to see the trends. They help you see trouble coming from a mile away and give you time to prepare, to weather the bad times, and to be ready to jump on opportunities in the good times. Ultimately, it really all boils down to this single idea. Having strong liquidity isn't just about paying your bills. It's about building a resilient company, a company that can survive, adapt, and even thrive, no matter what the economy decides to throw at it. It's the bedrock of real long-term strength.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty big question to think about. We all know profit is important, but as we've seen, it is absolutely not the whole story. So the question to ask is this: is your business just profitable on paper, or is it truly resilient enough to handle whatever comes next?